Welcome back to Linux Launch, Basic Linux Skills with a C-Model Framework. We're currently in Module 2, which is covering file management, and we're using the acronym creation. We're now on the letter R, which stands for read. Now, here's a picture of our course map, and you can see that we're in Module 2 and on the letter R, so this will help us see where we are in our journey currently. This is going to be the longest video we've done so far, as there's a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. So let's talk about how to read files. Before we can read the files, we have to know how to locate them. So we're going to look at 3 commands we can use to find files in our system: the ls command, the find command, and the locate command. I've prepared a directory for this class, so I'm going to go to that, cd documents, new files, and if I do an ls command, you can see that I've created, it has file 1, 2, and 3, and file 10, 11, 12, and 13. And then the same structure is mirrored with some PNG files. Pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, etc. So we're going to look at how to locate text files using the ls command. And say we were in a big directory with a lot of different files, we're going to use a wildcard. So you could do ls wildcard.txt, and it will show us only the text files. So the asterisk means find any number of characters. It doesn't matter how long that name is. It could be this is a new file 2.txt, and that asterisk.txt is going to locate that file. Notice it did not list the .pngs. We could do ls asterisk.png, and it will list only the PNG. And so you can use this called file globbing to locate different kinds of files in your system. Another thing that we can do is use another wildcard, which is the question mark, and we could use this in this way: ls file question mark.txt, and the question mark means only one character. So it's only going to match files that are file and then some character.txt. So when we look at this, we'll see what we're talking about. Notice it lists file 1, file 2, file 3 because the question mark replaces exactly 1. And so these have one number. It did not list file 10, 11, 12, 13 because those have more. Yet another thing we could do is use character sets. So we could do ls file bracket 2 and 3 .txt, and what we're saying is we want to find if the number 2 or 3 is there. And so if we hit enter, you can see file 2 and file 3 because that's a character set. So it did not find file 1 because 1 is not listed. We can also use a character range. So we could do ls file 1 through 3, and it will find those characters. And we press enter, you can see file 1, file 2, file 3 because that is the range. And so we can use an asterisk, we can use a question mark to find one character and only one, or we can find a set or a range, and that will help us find files in our system. Now let's clear our system, so let's clear our screen. And now we're going to look at the find command, and we could use the find command right here in this folder. We could use find, and the dot is telling it to search this specific directory, and we can use the name option, and we could also use a wildcard here just like we did with ls, and you can see it just shows us the text files. Now find is a really powerful command that will also search recursively through each subfolder. So if we had subfolders here, it would also search them. So that's a really powerful way to find things, but we can do something even more helpful, and we can run file, and this is looking at the root folder, and we can also use the name option. And I have a file in my user's home directory called testfile.txt, and so we can search for that. And you're going to see here that I have a little bit of a problem in that it is permission denied. And this is because the file is actually searching through every folder on the system, and my user doesn't have access to those. So we need to run the command sudo find root-name testfile.txt. And now you can see it's going to ask for my password. And now you can see that it does find this file even though we're not in that folder, it's searching the root folder as indicated here by the root symbol. So we first use the command find, then we tell it where we want it to look, then we can use an option like name and test file. Now you do see there's still a couple of permission denied, so we could run this command and add the redirect to redirect errors to dev null. And now we run it and we just see our result. And so that's a helpful way to run that. Now something else we can do is we can run that command, and I want to show you if I search for capital, it's not going to find that. As you can see, it's just going to see the permission denied in a couple of folders, but it doesn't find it because I don't have a file named that. Remember, Linux is case sensitive. But what I can do with the find command, if I don't remember exactly what it's named or how I named it, I can use the I in front of name, and that means to ignore case. And now if I run enter, it will find that file. So remember this, if you don't know exactly what you named it, you can do I name, and that way if you do have some caps or not, it will still find it. So that's a really good way to do that. We can also use other options other than name. We can use the size option, and we could say plus 10M, files bigger than 10 megabytes, but we want to look here in var log as an example. So we're searching the log folder for any files larger than that size. And you see there are some. So the size option is another useful way to use this command. We can also run the find command. We're going to search root this time, and we're going to go back to test file -name test file.txt, and you can take some action upon that file when it finds it. And so we're going to use the delete command. And now if we run that, and we could have sent these errors out to dev null. We didn't, but we believe that was successful, and so now I can actually search my user's home folder. Remember that tilde means home/username, which mine will be sysvin. And so we can look, and test file is now gone. So let's recreate that with touch and test file.txt. And now if we run ls on my user's home folder, we'll see that it's back. But we saw how to delete that. And so find is a really powerful command that can do a lot of good things, and it actually searches through all the folders on your system. Now let's clear our screen again. And now we're going to look at the locate command that will help us find files. So we first want to see if a package called plocate is installed in our system. So I'm going to run that command, and I see that it is installed. It is not usually installed by default on Ubuntu and other Linux systems, so you may have to install that with sudo apt update. You want to update your packet list, and then you would run sudo apt install plocate. And go ahead and add the -y option flag there, and that will go ahead and install that package for you. And once it is installed, use the command locate like this. So we'll search that test file.txt, and you can see that it finds it. And a couple of things here. Locate is a symlink that points to plocate and runs that in the background. And plocate, notice we did not have to use the sudo command with this one, because where find is searching through every file real time, every directory, locate is relying on a database. So when it is installed, there's a database located at, let's look at this, sudo var lib plocate, and here is the database, plocate.db. And so that database is updated every day with the root command, with the root permissions. And so you can see that cron job that runs daily. If we do etc cron.daily, you'll see here this plocate cron job that runs the update db command, and it updates that system. And so we're able to run that command locate that relies upon this database, and that database is being updated by a cron job. And so locate is a super powerful, super fast. Ubuntu used to use mlocate, but this plocate is even faster. Now I want to show you something. Let's create another file over in our user home folder using tilde as a shortcut for home/sysvin in my case. And we're going to do testfile2.txt. And we're going to create that. Sorry, I meant to do touch. So let's do touch with that. And now that should be created. We can now do the ls to see it there. And we see that it is in that location. So now if we use locate, well, let's just locate testfile2.txt, it is not going to find it. And that is because the database has not been updated and we just created this file. And so to update the database, we would have to use the sudo update db. And you see how easy this is. It's going to want my password. And so now we've updated the database, and now we should be able to run that, and we see our test file 2. And so it updates the database with all the files on the system, and then it searches that database and reports its findings. If you create a new file, it's not going to show up until you run the sudo update db. So that's a quick summary of locate, and now we've seen how to use ls, the find command, and the locate command to find and locate files on our system. And then we're ready to read those files. Now let's talk about reading the files. As you can see, I've cleared my screen. If we want to read a file, we can use the nano command, of course. That opens a text editor, so we could look at, say, Etsy services. And this is the file we're going to be using to demonstrate reading files. This is a system file that shows network services and their associated ports. So we could do nano Etsy services, press enter. It opens that file in a text editor. We could just do Control-X to quit. But we want to talk about how to read this in the terminal, and the main command that we use to read files is the cat command. And we're going to look at cat Etsy services, and it's going to output the contents of that file to our screen. Now, if you scroll back up with your trackpad, you can see this is a very long file. And the shortcoming of the cat command when it comes to reading long files is it just drops you right down to the bottom. You can't see the information as it passes, and you don't really know how long it was, and maybe you just wanted to see the first few lines of the file. Well, there's some options that we have to deal with that, and one is the head and tail commands. The head command by default shows you the first 10 lines of the file, and the tail command shows you the last 10 lines of the file. So let's demonstrate this. Head, Etsy services. It shows us the first 10 lines of the file by default, and tail, Etsy services, shows us the last 10 lines of the file by default. Now we can change this by going head-n 5 Etsy services, and that will show us the first 5 lines. So we're changing from the default, and we're actually specifying with the n option that we want to see only 5 lines. You can also just kind of push those two together and use head-5 and leave out the n, and that will also work. So just keep that in mind. It will show us the first 5 lines. Let's clear our screen. Now with tail, you can also specify a certain number of lines. Let's do tail-n20, Etsy services, and you can see the last 20 lines of the file. You can also do, let's clear our screen, you can also compress those together without the n, and that will also work. So you see that shows us the last 20 lines. So let's clear the screen. And a really interesting thing about tail is there is a -elf option that will let you actually monitor the file live. So it gives you the last 10 lines of the file, but then it will show you the new lines as they're updated, so you can monitor a file. Let's monitor a log file, and we'll do auth.log and press enter. And we're going to have to use sudo with that. So let's use our up arrow to bring that command back. Control A to go to the beginning, sudo. And Now we're seeing the last 10 lines of that file. And it is monitoring live. So for instance, if we go over here and open a new window, and we're going to drag this off to the side, and I'm going to run sudo ls and enter the password, and watch this file on the left. You see that it added a line as I tried to enter my password. So it logged, and we got to watch that file real time. And so this is a convenient way to monitor a file. So let's quit that with Control-C and clear our screen. Now the next thing I want to talk about is the paging utilities in Linux. There's two paging utilities, and they are more and less. That's kind of a funny naming convention, but more is a paging utility, so let's use that on our services, Etsy services file. And if you press enter, now what it has done is it's given you the first page of the file. It didn't drop you down to the bottom like cat does. You can scroll up a little bit and you'll see that more. But see down in the bottom left, it says more and 5%. That's telling you how much of the file you've currently viewed. Now, to page down in this file, so we can read this file one page at a time, you press the space key. And now you see more is at 10% in the bottom left. Now you see 18%. If you want to go down one line at a time, you press enter. See that Z3950 here at the bottom? We'll use that as our gauge. Now let's press enter, and you can see that we've only gone down one line at a time. Space goes down a page at a time. Now we're at 25%. Enter goes down one line at a time. There is a search feature in more. You can do the / and we could search Venus. I happen to know that's in this file. Press enter, and it will take you down to where you can see it, though it's not highlighted. You can see Venus here. So it took us to that section of the file. The only thing with more is you can't go back up in the file. You can't page back up. You could scroll up with your trackpad or grab the bar over here and move up and down, but you can't page up one page at a time. You can't go up one line at a time. So let's do Control-C to quit. That's where the less paging utility comes in. It has more flexibility. In fact, there's a quip in the Linux world that less is more, and that's kind of a funny way of saying less is actually more powerful than more. So let's do less Etsy services, press enter, and we're seeing the first page. You will notice there is no percentage down here in the lower left. It is not showing us what percentage we viewed, though you can configure less to do that, but it doesn't come by default. Now, just like with the more utility, we can do the space key to go down one page at a time. We can do the enter key to go down a line at a time. So notice this Sun RPC. Let's press the enter key, and you can see we're just moving one line at a time. The space bar takes us one page at a time. Now, there are other keys that will help you navigate, and remember, with less we can go up or down. So let's go over and look on your keyboard to your arrow keys. If I press the down arrow, I'm going down one line at a time, not one page at a time, just one line at a time. And the up arrow takes me up. So with less, I can go back up, and that's a convenient feature. So down arrow goes down one line at a time, up arrow goes up one line at a time. There's also some keyboard shortcuts. You can do Control-J to go down one line at a time. And now use Control-K and watch the screen, and we go up one line at a time with Control-K. So J goes down, K goes back up one line at a time. Now, to go up and down a page at a time, in addition to using the space bar to go down, there's also these page keys, page up and page down on my keyboard. So I can do page down, and I drop down in the file a page at a time. I could just keep paging to the end, but I can do the page up and go back up. So let's go back up to the very top of the file, and here we are. Now, just like there were shortcut keys to go one line at a time, there's also shortcut keys to go a page at a time. So I do Control-F, and I can go down an entire page at a time. I can do Control-B, and I have an error here, waiting for data. So let me do Control-C. Now let's go back up. We're going to do Control K to go back up in the file. I'm sorry, let's go on one line at a time. Let's do Control B, and we're going back one page at a time, and we can go all the way to the top. Now, just like more had a search feature, less also has a search feature. So we can do less. In less, we can do the forward space, and let's look for Venus again. We know that's here. Go down, and we see the Venus here, and it's highlighted. And now we can also search back up in the file, unlike more. So I can do, to do that, you do the question mark. So I happen to know there's a file, there's a service called systat at the beginning, and we press the question mark systat to go back, and it searched back up and went to systat. So that is a really convenient feature. And now if we go back down and look at Venus, if I try to go forward and look for systat with the /, and that's a good way to remember it, / is searching forward, it will not find anything because it's not further down in this file. So I go back up. There's also a really convenient thing you can do there. If you use the lowercase n, it will repeat the search you just did. If you use the uppercase n, it will repeat. It will do the opposite search of what you just did. So let's go back down to Venus, and it finds it here. And I want to do a forward search for systat, and we know that that service is not further down in this file; it's back up. But I'm searching forward with the /. I press enter. It's not found. Now all I have to do, I don't have to do the question mark systat. I can just do capital N, and it does the opposite search and takes me back up. So that's a basic introduction to head and tail and less and more. Now to get out of less, you have to do Q for quit, and that gets us out. And now I want to talk about some other features in Linux that will help us read certain portions of a file. Here's the chart that I wanted to provide on navigating less, and you'll see there's two columns here with the key in the left-hand column and the action on the right, and it'll show what each key does, and you'll see whether it pages up or down, whether it goes up and down a line or a page at a time. So I hope this is helpful, and we'll now move on to the next section. Now let's clear our screen again, and we're going to move on to talk about viewing parts of the file. Suppose we have a big file and we don't want to read the entire output, and we just want to see certain parts of the file. There are ways that we can do that. Now let's look at an example file, cat etc pass wd, and you can see this is a long file. We could do more etc pass wd so we can look at it, and you can see all of these entries of different accounts. For instance, look at the very bottom, and you'll see my Sysvin username, and there's also this Clark K account that we used earlier. Let's focus specifically on the Clark K account, and you'll see that the Clark K is the username for an account that I had on this system. The X is a placeholder for the password. At one time, the password was contained, at least the hash for the password was contained in the passwd file, though it's now been moved to etc shadow, which is a more secure file. And then we see the 1002, that's the UID. The next 1002 is the GID, the group ID. And then we see /home/ClarkK, which is the user's home folder. And then /bin/bash is the user's login shell. And so I just wanted you to know the information that we're looking at here. Now, let's talk about how to read only part of this file, how to get out the information that we want. So let's clear our screen. Let's clear our screen with the clear command. And say we just want to get out information about the user Clark K. There's a command known as grep. And that actually comes from the old Unix editor, and it came from this global regular expression print. I'm just showing you the history of it here. That's what it was called. That's where the name comes from. And so, be that as it may, we can use it here in Linux, and it's one of the reasons to love Linux. is the grep command is so powerful. So we can grep a file and look for a specific pattern. And we want to look for Clark K. And we want to search in etc passwd. And you can see here that it finds it, and it shows us the line that we're looking for, only for that user. And so we've got this big file, passwd. It's complex to look at. It's very busy. And we don't want to go and look through and try to find our Clark K user. And so we just run the grep command, and we find that. Now, if I were to mistype this and put Clark K, capital K, or Clark K with a capital K like that, and then search this, I would not find anything because Linux is case sensitive. But I can run a -I, which tells it to ignore the case, and then I can mistype it, or maybe I didn't know how I named it in the first place. And now let's search this file, and we will see now that we find it this way because I've used the -I. So remember to use grep, and then the term that you want to search, and then where you want to search. And we can also use this -I to ignore the case. Now, in addition to using grep in this way, searching a term, searching a folder for a term, we can also use it with the output of other commands. So we saw this earlier, cat etc passwd, that's just reading out the file, and we can use a pipe. And remember, with a pipe, we are taking the information, the output of one command, and we are piping it over to another command. And here, that command is grep, and we want to search for this pattern, Clark K. Or let's search my other username this time, Sysvan. And we press enter, and we can see that it finds it. And so you can do that with any kind of command. You can run the ls command and search and pipe the output to grep. You could run any number of commands and do that with. So grep is a very powerful command. Now, another thing you can do with grep is search recursively through a large directory. Like, say we want to look for Clark K, but we want to know all instances of where it is used in the etc directory. Now, this grep will search recursively throughout all the subfolders in /etc. And there's a lot of them. Now, we are going to have to use the sudo command here, or we would get permission denied, because there's a lot of those etc directories that we don't have access to. But if we run it with sudo, we'll be okay. Let's press enter, and let's enter in our password. And now you'll see that it found several instances in several locations. So there's a group. When you create a username, it creates a group to go along with it. We see it's in our user file here, our passwd, and we find other mentions of it, other locations. So grep is a very powerful tool. You can use it to get out just the information, or to search a file and just see if that information is in that file and see if that term is there. So it can be very useful. Now let's clear our screen again. And now we're going to talk about the awk command, AWK. Now, where does this name come from? It actually comes from the name of the authors who created this tool, and you can see that now on your screen. These are 3 individuals, and so it's an author acronym. Well, what exactly does it do? Well, sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you want to print a certain column of a file, and you want to read a certain column. So let's bring back up our diagram of etc password. This is the kind of entry you'll see. And this is for our user, Clark K. And we talked about this earlier in the class. And we can see the various columns here. The first one is the username, Clark K. The second one is the password placeholder, as we spoke of earlier. And the third one is the UID, and then followed by the GID, the group ID. And then we'll talk about this in a moment, this blank space between these 2 colons. And that is called the geekos field. And then the home Clark is the home directory, and then the login shell. So maybe you want to print one of these columns. We saw earlier with grep how we could get this whole line, but maybe you just want to print the first column of that entire file, etc passwd. And I want to paste something here, and we need to put a $1. When it comes to our etc password file and using the awk command, you're going to see that we're going to use this $, followed by a number, symbol. And $1 stands for the first column, $2 would stand for the second column, and so on. Now, this space I talked about between the two colons, this is called the GECOS field, and it's from the General Electric Comprehensive Operating Supervisor, which was integrated with earlier Unix systems, and the name has just stuck for this field. Most of the time, it's going to be empty. Sometime you'll see commas, but you can use that field to use the user's entire username, home address, phone number, and depending on how you create that user, you might get that information there, but in this, it is empty. And then we see the home directory and the login shell. Now let's go back to our terminal and see how to use the awk command and see if we can understand this a little more clearly. So the syntax for the awk command is a quote and a bracket, and then we would use the word print, so we're telling it to run the print program. And now here's where we enter in what column we want to print. And then we would give it the file that we want to print it out of, past WD. And so if we press enter, here you're going to see it actually gave us everything that is in the file. And that is because the default for awk is that it uses for its delimiter, for its field separator, it uses white space. And as you can see in etc past WD, this doesn't have any white space. It, in fact, is delimited by colons instead of white space. And so we need to do something. Let's clear our screen. We need to add a -elf, which is the field separator or delimiter, and we want to tell it what we want to use to divide those fields. And so we're going to use a colon because that's what etc past WD uses. And now we enter in our quotation mark so it treats it as one thing. We're going to run the program print and then followed by $1 and etc past WD. And now we should just see our, okay, I didn't add in my last quotation mark. And now we're going to see the first field. And so look down here at the bottom, here's our usernames. And so if we just wanted to, instead of looking at that entire busy file, and we just wanted to print out the first field, we would use this print $1. Now we could also, let's clear our screen again, and we could do the same command, but we could use $7. And remember we said that 7 was the last field, which is the login shell. And you can see here, bin bash, that's the login shell. We could do, we could run that same command, and we could do field 6, and it's going to give us the home directory for all of the users. Now, awk will become very powerful in a file like etc past WD, where we have this very busy, complex file, and we want to see just a column. It can also come in handy with a log file. If you've ever tried to read through logs, if you're working as a network engineer or as a security engineer, and you're reading through logs, it can be a real headache to try to decipher what exactly you're looking at. And so if you have a specific field of the logs that you want to look at and see the event that occurred, maybe the date that it occurred, you could run this, and we could actually give, this the $3, and we can see different information. And so this is the UID or the GID. I think it's the UID. And so you see how awk works. It's a very powerful tool to be able to work with these complex files and see just exactly what we want to see. And so you can see why this goes into our read section, because it is about reading files in a very specific way. Now, let's go to our home folder, my home directory. So we'll just do tilde, and now clear our screen and do pwd to see our directory. We are in the home directory. Now here, let's run the ls command, ls-l, to get the long listing. And you'll see this is also a good place where we might want to use the awk command to print out a specific column. And in this output, you'll see that it doesn't use colons. It does use white space, so we can use the default awk command and do not have to set a field separator. So let's clear the screen, and the way we would run this is to do ls-l, and that's going to give the output, but we're going to pipe that output to the awk command, and we're going to print $1. And that should give us just the permissions, and we see that it does. It gives us the first field of the output for all the folders in our home directory, all the folders and files. And now we could also add to that, and we could print out, I happen to know there are 9 fields, I believe, and so the last field will be the name of the directory, and we can run that, and now we get 2 columns. So we can really narrow down our output and look at specific things in a file instead of looking at an entire output. And so this is a very helpful way to use awk. Now another thing that we can do is, let's go to ls-l again, and you can see you might want to print the last field or the next to the last field, but you don't want to count and see how many are there. And so we can do something here. Let's bring up our ls command, and we can, instead of using a specific number, we can use nf. And nf means number of fields. And so the number of fields is going to be 9, so that's the same as saying print $9. And we see that it does print the output. It does print the folder name for us, and so that worked well. Now what if we want to do the next to the last? Well, we can just do this. We need to put it in parentheses, and we can do -1, so it's like, let's close that parentheses, so it's like saying the number of fields -1, which would be 8, which would be next to the last. So in this instance, and this is the modification time, so we wouldn't have to count over and see exactly what output we want, what field we want to see. We could just look at it and know that we want to see the next to the last column, and we can use nf-1. So there's a lot of things you can do with awk, and it really helps you narrow down your output or narrow down your file so that you can read the information that you want to read. And so I hope that we have a better understanding of awk, and I would encourage you to get in your system and play around with it and see the kinds of output that you get. Now let's clear our screen again, and we're going to look at the cut command. So let's clear, and the cut command is a text slicer that lets you view a part of a file or a specific column of a file. It sort of does what awk does in some ways. So let's run the man command on cut. This is the manual, so we can see a little bit about this command. And here you can see the synopsis. This gives the syntax of the command. You see you use the cut command with an option or a couple of options, and the cut tells it what to do, and we're going to cut. The option tells it what to cut or where to cut, and the file is the file that you want to perform this operation upon. Now if we look at the description, we'll see some options, and you can see that you can cut and tell it to cut so many bytes. And there's also the character option. You can tell it to cut so many characters. And then there's a delimiter that tells us where we want to do the field separation. And then there's a field option where we tell it basically the column that we want to cut. Now I've got a chart that I want to show you. And you'll see here in this chart that it shows the options that we saw when we ran man cut. It shows what each option is and an example command along with that option. So -C, and this is the option that means to cut by character position. And so we see an example command here, cut -C 1-5 file.txt, and that's saying give me the first 5 letters of each line of this file. Then we see the -B, which is cut by byte position, and the example command is cut -B 1-3 file.txt. And just a little note on bytes, in most cases, especially with plain English text or ASCII characters, 1 byte equals 1 character. This one is not used as commonly as the -C option, but we also see a -ELF option, which is cut by field or column, and the command here is cut -ELF to file.txt, and that would cut the second field, and it would give you that part of the file. And -D lets you set the delimiter or the field separator, and the example command is cut -D quote comma end quote -ELF 1 for first column file dot CSV or TXT, whatever the case may be. Now I want to do a couple of examples. So over here in our terminal, let's do Control C, or actually Q, to get out of that. And now let's clear, and I've prepared a couple of files, so let's do CD desktop, and here's the files. I have an employee text and an employees to text, and let's cat the employees text, and you'll see here I just have a name and a position and a city, and each one of these fields are separated by a comma. And so if we wanted to use cut on this, we could do character and cut -C 1 through 5 employee.text, and you'll see it gave us the first 5 characters, including space, like Bob S, Bob Smith. It gave us Bob space S, and so it gave us the first 5 characters of each line. And we could do the same thing with byte. We could do the -B option, 1 through 5, or let's do 7 through 12 employee.text. And you'll see if you count over here with the first line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is J, and then it goes on over to 12, and you can see that's exactly what it's printed out for us. And so you can use this cut command to slice the text and give you what you want. Now, if we wanted to use the -elf, we could use -elf employee.text. There, let's pick a field. Let's say we wanted to see the position, which would be column 2, and employee.text, and we press enter, and it gave us everything, because by default cut uses a tab for delimiter, and so we need to give it a different delimiter to actually get this to work. So let's do cat -elf 2-D for delimiter, and we're going to put a comma here because that's what our file is using, and employee.text, and now we can see it does give us the second field because we gave it the comma for a delimiter, and it knows that engineer is the second field, and manager is the second field here, and designer is the second field here. So that's also a way that you can do these fields. Now we can also do, let's clear our screen, and I have another file. Let's cat out that employee2.text, and you'll see here that I have used tabs, and so this field command should work fine without having to give a delimiter. So we do cut field 2-elf 2 employees 2.text, press enter, and it gives us the second field. We could give it the third field, and we would be able to get that information out and read only the third field. And I have something wrong in this third file. Maybe I didn't get my tab right, but you'll see that basically this works, and it should work for you if your fields are separated correctly. So another thing we can do, remember we've talked about piping, and we can use the cut command with a pipe. So we could do ls-l, the normal output you can see here, and we say we wanted to see the third field. We could do ls-l pipe that output to cut, and we would do -elf 3, press enter. It gives us everything because we did not give it a delimiter, and it doesn't have tabs, so we need to give that a delimiter, and we will just add in a -D, and we're just going to do a blank space. So open that quote, give a space, and then close the quote, and now it gives us the third field, which is my username and the owner of the file, and you see that's what it gave us here. So that works very well, and you'll use this cut command, and you can use it to view the part of the file that you want to, and this is all part of reading the file. So this command brings us to the conclusion of our read section, and we've learned how to do a lot of things. We've learned how to find files. We've learned how to read the file with cat. We've learned how to use head and tail and less and more. We've learned how to use grep and awk, and now we've learned how to use cut. And so you have a lot of flexibility with how you can view these files and read these files, and I hope that this will be helpful to you. If you've enjoyed this video, please like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope to see you in the next section where we're going to talk about editing files and making changes to files and the best way to do that.